All right, so for my presentation, we're going to be looking at cooperative breeding and prosociality in meerkats. The paper that this came from was called Meerkats Fail to be Prosocial in an Experimental Setup. So first we need to look at cooperative breeding versus prosociality. Cooperative breeding is when members of the same species provide help in raising and caring for the young. And then the care for the offspring is not just from the parents. Meerkats are known to be cooperative breeding, and usually in cooperative breeding groups, you see a dominant male and female, and then those are generally the ones having offspring. And then with prosociality, we see members of the same species providing resources to other individuals. This can be with food, shelter, and then the members work as a group to survive. And then this can either come from sharing or donating. So giving all of what you got or just sharing a little bit. And then we see prosociality a lot in like ants and stuff. So that's a pretty good example of where you would see prosociality. So the main questions that this paper addresses is cooperative breeding a precursor to prosociality in an evolutionary sense? And then, why do cooperative breeding meerkats actively donate food to pups in the group but fail to be prosocial in the experiment? So the hypothesis, what I got that they were trying to hypothesize from this is that cooperative breeding may be a precursor to sociality. And then the second hypothesis would be the group is most likely prosocial towards the pups only for a certain amount of time or until they reach a certain age. So now we can look at the materials and methods. They used a mob of meerkats from a German zoo. A mob is just what they call like a group of meerkats. And then these meerkats had previously exhibited cooperative breeding. And then they used a two-sided platform with food rewards. And then the platform only allowed for one side to move the platform. So if we look at this platform right here, we see two shelves that the meerkats would have to actually be standing on in order to use the device. This is the side where the subject would stand, and then the other side is where the partner would stand. And then the food reward would be up on this platform. And again, only the meerkat on the subject side would be able to pull or push the device in order to get more food. So yeah, we see partner over here, subject, platform, and it can move in either direction, but only by the subject. So with this, they recorded the time, like they recorded each time the meerkat was on the platform, and then they recorded if they were sharing or not sharing, and then they also recorded the rank within the mob. And then they would do different scenarios where like the subject would have food and the partner wouldn't have food on the platform, or they would both have food. They would do where the partner had food but the subject didn't have food, and then there would be also times that neither of them had food, and they recorded each of these situations. So the results, we can see that dominant males and females took partner's food both when partner was present and absent. And then if the subject did not have food, they were less likely to pull. So here's the graph that they gave us in the paper. We see the like situation on like the setup on the x-axis, and then on the y-axis we see the mean percentage of pulls. So you can see when there was food for the subject in both of these situations, we saw a large number of pulls here. And then when there was no food for the subject and possibly food for the partner, this is a situation where there was food on the partner side but no partner, and then this is a situation where there's food on the partner side and a partner was there. So they saw a decrease in pulls, but they kind of thought that maybe they just didn't understand the setup, and then they didn't understand that actually pulling the platform would take food away from the subject. So they also said that a lot of the times the subject would try to run over to the partner side to take the food rather than pulling it all the way through to get it. So their discussion on why the Meerkats were not displaying prosocial behavior, again, experimental error, possibly they just didn't understand the setup. They thought that maybe they would be prosocial in a natural environment, but not in the lab setting that they had set up. And then possibly meerkats are just not prosocial. So for the first hypothesis, which was the cooperative breeding may be a precursor to prosociality, I think this was kind of a broad hypothesis to take on with such a small study. So I don't think that they were able to indicate that cooperative breeding was a precursor to prosociality. And then their second hypothesis was that the group was most likely prosocial towards the pups only for a certain amount of time or until they reached a certain age. They didn't actually use pups in this experiment, so I don't think that they were able to really explain that any further. And then their suggestions for further research included testing more individuals. They used such a small group from the zoo that maybe their numbers were skewed because of that. And then they suggested using a finer grained analysis at the dyadic level and different methodological approaches. So maybe a different experimental setup that the meerkats would understand better. And then kind of suggestions from an evolutionary biology perspective. I suggested using Hamilton's rule to detect whether the costs of giving the food outweighed the benefit to the group. So they need to include the relationship of the individuals and then see that maybe meerkats are not prosocial because the individual cost ends up being too high for the individual. So we see again Hamilton's rule. So we have relatedness, benefit to the recipient, and cost to the altruist. So this is something that they just didn't really discuss in the paper. They didn't really talk about the relatedness. They did talk about the rank within the mob, but I don't think that necessarily would help with this Hamilton's rule. And then they didn't really go too much into detail about the benefit and the cost to the altruist, especially since this was in a zoo setting. So the cost to the altruist may be pretty low because no matter what, the meerkat's going to get food. So they're not really at as high of a cost. So maybe doing this in more of a natural setting would be more beneficial with clearer results. And then here's my works cited page, and that is all. Thank you.